welcome back to my Inspiring All Readers with Books from A to Z video series, where I am sharing with you different multicultural stories that begin with each letter of the alphabet and have similar themes of inclusion, diversity, empathy, and kindness. In each video, I will share with you some different reading strategies and skills that correlate with the story, and then also some discussion questions that you can ask your students after reading. I also have a free printable reading response journal for you, and also a free printable graphic organizer to go along with each and every story in my video series. Now, I recommend that you start reading these books aloud to your students at the beginning of a new school year to help build that inclusive and welcoming classroom community. But then revisit with these books at different times throughout the year when you are celebrating a specific holiday or you want to teach a specific strategy or skill. If you are following me along in my video series, welcome back. If you are new here, my name is Melissa and I teach second grade. This is my 18th year of teaching. I help other teachers create a classroom community of engaged and independent readers who love to read by providing meaningful and effective videos, resources, and support so they can improve their reading instruction, student performance, and engagement. With that being said, let's continue on with our video series of Inspiring All Readers with Books A to Z with letter C. Chocolate milk, por favor, represents letter C. The author is Maria Dismondy. And in this story, Johnny is a little boy who loves school. Well, he loves it, that is, until Gabe arrives. It's Gabe's first day of school in America, and he doesn't speak English. At first, Johnny is very unwelcoming and rude to Gabe. In this page, he's showing how he's watching the other boy help out Gabe, but he's just thinking, look, he's not like us. He can't even speak and order his lunch. He continues to be pretty unwelcoming throughout the story. He watches at recess how Gabe is doing a tricky soccer move and kind of watches with jealousy. He notices how his other classmates are actually very welcoming to Gabe. Johnny's still ignoring him, though. Not liking school as much. However, one day at recess, Johnny asks Gabe, how do you do that soccer move? Well, Gabe shows him. Gabe shows Johnny, and you know it, that starts the beginning of their friendship. It's at the end of the story where Johnny starts to change. And we see that the reason why he's changing is because that horrible feeling of being frustrating and wanting to cry because he couldn't get the soccer move, that's how Gabe must have felt learning a new language. I did it. I finally got the tricky move and Gabe is getting it too. So he starts to change and realize how he was not a very good friend. And he started to have a lot more empathy for his new friend, Gabe. And then at the very end of the story, Johnny greets Gabe with some chocolate milk. Johnny learned that actions speak louder than words. He understood that to have a friend is to first be a friend. Couple of things I want to point out about this beautiful book. The first thing is that I love how The author has the real Gabe at the back of the book. And she talks about how this story is fiction based on an experience that she had with her own first grader Gabe. So if you're reading this book to your students, you will want to for sure share the real Gabe with your students. The author then has 10 tips to assist English language learners. One of them being, your name is important. ELL students need to know that you care enough about them to pronounce their name correctly. So important. I also love how the author has some discussion questions at the very beginning. So for example, she has before, during, after discussion questions. One of the questions after reading would be, how can differences among people help us learn? So she has about 10 different discussion questions that you can ask your students. So if we now move on to some of the different reading strategies and skills that lend itself beautifully when reading this story. Let's first talk about character changes. You can explicitly teach your students about how a character changes from the beginning of the story to the end of the story using textual evidence, and this is a great book to teach that. So we can look back to the beginning of the story and we can look to see how Johnny acted, what his thoughts and feelings were, and how that changed throughout the story to how Johnny ended at the end of the story being friends with Gabe. So how did he make that change from being very judgmental, rude, unwelcoming to Gabe to all of a sudden being friends with Gabe and going back to that part in the story to find evidence of really when Johnny started to make that change in his behaviors, thoughts, and action. You can tie that into teaching about character traits, maybe comparing, contrasting the character traits of Johnny and Gabe. And you can also teach about the author's message. This would be a great book to teach about what the author's message is, which would be that student differences are to be celebrated. Student differences are to be celebrated. And again, going back to that story to find evidence to prove how you know that. The last thing that you can do is you can do a Venn diagram with your students. Find a classmate to work with. Discuss your similarities, what you have in common, and your differences, what makes you different. Write your ideas in the Venn diagram. So you can pair your students up with a new friend and they can write their similarities and their differences. And they can do that with the Venn diagram, free printable that you can print up, and you can find that in the link of the video description below. Last but not least, I wanted to remind you that if you wanted to use to have your students write down their response to some of those discussion questions. So if you go back to those wonderful questions that the author put down at the beginning of the book, you can have your students write their response to maybe one of those questions in their reading response journal. I sure hope that you are inspired to share this wonderful, wonderful story with your own students. And I also hope that you hit like to this video and you are subscribed so that you are following me along in this video series. And I will see you for letter D in my next video.